The crying started around the third hour. I was on my back under Shuttle 4's port landing strut, placing a hydraulic seal that had been weeping fluids since Outpost Corval, when I heard it, high and thin at first, coming from somewhere deeper in the hangar. I didn't think much of it. The Valhari carrier Southern Passage was a big ship, 1,200 meters of imperial gray alloy and ceremony, and strange sounds moved through her in strange ways. I kept working, then it got louder. I slid out from under the strut in time to see them. A procession of 12, all in the layered white and silver of first-order attendants, moving fast down the hangar deck toward the secondary bay. Each one taller than me by a head, each one pale as river ice, their long fingers doing things, adjusting, presenting, withdrawing as they moved. In the center of the procession, strapped into some kind of floating carry-cot at chest height, was the source of the sound, the Emperor's daughter. Issel, barely 2 years old by Valhari reckoning, which made her roughly 18 months by ours. I'd caught glimpses of her before, the whole carrier had. In that careful way you catch glimpse of things that could get you reassigned to somewhere cold and featureless. She had the Valhari look, skin the color of pale birchwood, eyes that shifted between silver and deep violet depending on the light, and small pointed ears that lay flat against her head when she was distressed. Right now they were flat as I'd ever seen them. She was screaming with her whole body. Not tantrum screaming. This was the other kind. The kind that means something is specifically wrong and not being fixed. The attendants were cycling through what I assumed was their full repertoire. Soft harmonic tones from a resonance device, a rotating display of colored light forms, cloth toy shaped like something between a deer and a crustacean, offered and withdrawn. None of it was working. The screaming continued, undiminished, filling the hangar bay with the kind of sound that gets into your back teeth. Nobody looked at me. I was a human maintenance mechanic on a temporary cross-service posting, lying on a drip mat next to a hydraulic jack. I was part of the floor. I watched them work. 12 of the Emperor's most elevated childcare specialists. And they were rotating through options the way you rotate through a bad socket set. Trying the next one because the last one didn't fit, not because you have a diagnosis. I recognized the process. I'd done it myself early on, before I learned to stop and look at what was actually broken. That's when I saw it. It was on the deck, about 2 meters from the carry-cot, in the gap between a fuel cart and the bulkhead. Small, brass-colored or the Velari equivalent, an alloy that caught light in the same warm way. Clockwork bird, maybe 15 centimeters from beak to tail. Wings half extended in the position they freeze when the mainspring goes. Dropped, rolled silent. I looked at the baby, I looked at the bird, I picked up the bird. One of the attendants turned. The look I got was the specific look I have received, in various forms, from various species, throughout a long career of being in rooms where I was not supposed to have an opinion. I put the bird in my lap and opened my multi-tool. The mainspring wasn't broken. That was the first thing. Broken mainsprings are a replacement job, and I didn't have a replacement. It was stripped at the anchor point, slipped off the post, coiled loose inside the housing. I'd seen the same thing in portable sensors, timing mechanisms, in half a dozen pieces of equipment that had been dropped at exactly the wrong angle. You reseat the coil, retension the anchor, check that the escapement wheel is still aligned. 4 minutes, if you're comfortable with small work, comfortable with small work. The bird began to sing on my third wind of the crown, a soft 3-note phrase repeating. Not loud, not dramatic, just present. The screaming stopped, not tapered off, stopped, mid-breath. The kind of stop that leaves a silencence you can feel in your sternum. Looked up. Issel was staring at me. Silver eyes, fully open, ears lifted off her head, both small hands extended toward the bird in my hands. Face had ceased the absolute focused intensity that very young children have when they want something, and have only just discovered that wanting is communicable. I got up off the floor, which took a moment because I am 54 years old and hangar decks are not forgiving surfaces, and I walked to the carry-cot and held the bird out where she could see it clearly. She grabbed it with both hands. She held it to her chest. She made a sound that was not crying at all. Then she looked at me again, not at the bird, at me. I don't know how to explain what that look was. I had people look at me with gratitude before. I've had people look at me with relief. This was something else. The way very small people look at you when they have decided, without consultation and without appeal, that you are a fixed point in the world. Like gravity. Like something that is simply there and can be counted on. She reached for me. I sat down on the hangar deck, with my back against the carry-cot strut, and let her settle against my chest. She did, with the efficiency of someone who has decided where they are sleeping and considers the matter closed. The bird kept singing, pitched against her sternum. Her ears relaxed, her eyes closed. In 4 minutes she was asleep. The hangar bay was very quiet. I became aware, gradually, that I was being looked at. Not the floor look, the other kind. All 12 attendants were still. The fuel crew at the far end had stopped working. Someone had come in from the corridor access. A tall figure in military gray, rank insignia on the collar, standing at the edge of the attendant group, with a look I couldn't immediately read. General Sorvan. I knew the name. Everyone on posting knew the name. He wasn't looking at the baby. He was looking at my jacket. I've worn that jacket for 11 years. It's a work jacket, heavy canvas, oil-stained at the cuffs, left breast pocket reinforced for tool loops. Above the pocket, stitched in the faded green and copper thread that someone put there long before I inherited the posting, is the unit patch of the 8th Corval Colonial Engineers, a pick and a transit level, crossed on a field of dark green. We weren't a combat unit. We built things in places the surveying corps had given up on, maintained things that were never supposed to last as long as they did. And, for 11 years of a conflict that nobody on either side had officially named a conflict, a maintenance corridor on Corval Station that happened to be the only route between the Velhari forward position and their fuel supply. We didn't hold it because we were soldiers. We held it because we were mechanics, and the corridor had 3 systems that needed continuous maintenance to stay pressurized, and we weren't going to leave our equipment. Took 3 steps toward me. He stopped. His expression had moved through something I couldn't follow and come out the other side into something careful and still. 8th Corval, he said, in the flat Velhari way that isn't a question but means one. Yes, sir, I said, kept my voice low. The baby was still asleep. He looked at the patch for a long moment. Then he looked at Issel, breathing slow and even against my chest, one hand still curled around the clockwork bird. The corridor held for 11 years, he said quietly. My engineers told the Emperor it was structurally unreachable. He believed them. A pause. I did not believe them. I didn't have anything useful to say to that, so I didn't say anything. He crouched down to my level, which I think, given his rank, was not something he did often, and looked at me with the expression I'd been unable to read. It was, I realized, the expression of someone recalculating something they thought they'd already solved. The Emperor will want to see you, he said. The Emperor's daughter is asleep, I said. Something moved across Sorvan's face that may have been the Velhari equivalent of a smile. He stood and said something to the attendants in rapid formal Velhari that my translator caught in pieces. First order escort, mechanic, chambers, honor designation. One of the attendants, a tall woman with silver-streaked markings along her jaw, looked at me with an expression I recognized too, calibration. I sat on the hangar floor for another 20 minutes until Issel woke on her own. When she did, she looked up at me with those silver-shifting eyes and offered me the clockwork bird, and then took it back immediately, which seemed about right. The Emperor received me in the secondary formal chamber, which was smaller than the primary one, and still larger than any room I'd worked in. He was a tall man, pale as his daughter, with the Velhari bearing that looks like stillness but is actually attention. He thanked me in the formal register, which my translator handled adequately. He offered me the designation of the third comfort, an honorary title in the imperial household structure, formal precedence above a planetary governor. I told him I was grateful, but that I was a mechanic and didn't have much use for precedence. He looked at me for a moment. Then he offered me a posted commission instead, a permanent maintenance billet aboard the Southern Passage, assigned to the imperial household's mechanical needs, unrestricted access to the hangar bays, my own tool locker, a bunk with a porthole I had not had in 3 years. I told him that sounded like a reasonable arrangement. Issel, who had been carried in by the first order attendant, and had immediately tracked me across the room with those gray-silver eyes. Made a decisive sound. She held out the clockwork bird in my direction. I took it, checked the tension on the crown, handed it back. She was satisfied. So was I. Servan walked me out afterward, down a corridor long enough that we had time for silence to settle comfortably between us, which is how you know when it's worth something. At the hangar access, he stopped. You held that corridor with 43 engineers, he said. No weapons emplacements, no combat certification on record. We had the tools we had, I said. He looked at the patch again, then at me. Whatever he was weighing, he seemed to finish weighing it. The Emperor's daughter has 12 first-order attendants, he said. None of them thought to look for what was broken. They were doing their jobs, I said. It's a different kind of job than mine. He nodded once, the kind of nod that ends a conversation cleanly, and went back the way he'd come. I went back to Shuttle 4. The hydraulic seal still needed finishing. I got back under the strut, got the seal seated properly, torqued it to spec, and lay there for a moment in the quiet, listening to the carrier's systems hum around me. Somewhere in the upper decks, I knew, Baby was asleep with a clockwork bird. I'd be seeing her again. That seemed fine. I cleaned my tools, logged the repair, and went to find my new bunk.